Over to you, Mary Margaret.
Hello, family. I am Mary Margaret. I'm an alcoholic, and I am so happy to be here tonight as your speaker. But I'm just going to be honest. Sharing my experience, strength, and hope is not my favorite thing to do, but I do it. I do it. I show up and I do it. And Eric, he knows that this is not my favorite thing to do. And he messaged me the other day and he said, somebody asked me when you were going to share your experience, strength, and hope. And um, I need somebody for Sunday night. So I'm just wondering if you're about it. And so I told him that as soon as I read the text, I hear God's voice, his little whisper that he does say, "Of course you will, of course." And so I told Eric. And then Eric wasn't even going to be here tonight. So I said, Eric, I think this might have been a little bit of manipulation, but I don't know. So we'll find out later. I'll ask him. Anyway, of course, I am here. All right. So I am an alcoholic, and I just have a question for y'all. Do you know the difference between a northern fairy tale and a southern fairy tale? No? Okay. A northern fairy tale starts off once upon a time, and a southern fairy tale starts off, you ain't gonna believe this. Now, I hope you notice I didn't complete the word. I just said shh because I've been taught that profanity is not a sign of spiritual growth. So, thank you all, each and every one of you, for helping this little girl from Stone Mountain, Georgia, who felt like she always was holding her breath. My whole life, I have felt like I was holding my breath and I just couldn't breathe. And now I can breathe. I can finally breathe. And it's because of Alcoholics Anonymous, the God of my own understanding, and each and every one of you. You know, our book says our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. Well, I took my first intentional drink at 15 years old. And then, fast forward, by baby number 3, I was not even willing to breastfeed that child because I wanted to drink so bad. Like breastfeeding wasn't an option for that baby. And then, as it progressed, I couldn't leave home without a roadie. Couldn't leave the house without my Chick-fil-A cup full of Miller Lite. And Rhodey did all my grocery shopping. And I would leave my daughter, her name is Belle. I would leave Belle stranded at sports without a ride home because Rhodey told me, don't worry, just keep drinking. She'll get a ride. And I would end up at parent teacher conferences with Rhodey doing all the talking. And I wouldn't remember anything that Rhodey said. And I would meet my friends on a Friday afternoon before my oldest son's football game for happy hour. And before I knew it, I had missed the game. Rhodey had talked me into one more and one more and one more. You guys, Miller Lite was my best friend. And as Bill says in his story, alcohol had become my master. But none of those things that I just described to you makes me an alcoholic. What makes me a real alcoholic is once I put alcohol in my body, my choice is gone. Once the alcohol is in there, I trigger that phenomenon of craving. I trigger an allergy. And I'm not drinking out of choice anymore. I'm drinking because I have no other choice. And that phenomenon of craving, the allergy is determining how much I'm going to drink. And nothing can stop me but an act of God. I had no idea about any of this. And if you look on page 44 in We Agnostics, it says, if when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. I had no idea Miller Lite had anything to do with God or a power greater than myself. I had no idea there was a correlation there. And so when we look at step one, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. In May of 2020, during COVID, we had been quarantined to the house, and I could no longer get to my 36 Miller Lights a day. And at that point, I was lying to drink, cheating to drink, stealing to drink, anything that I could possibly do to get to a drink. But when you are quarantined into your home with a family of four other people, three dogs, fish, frogs, rabbits, all the above, um, and your daughter says, "Why do you keep leaving the house? What makes you so special, Mom?" I didn't have an answer for her. And so I knew at that point I couldn't keep going to walk with my friend. I just couldn't keep leaving the house. And so for the first 2 days, I just stayed in bed, said I didn't feel good. But by that third day, I really didn't feel good. I needed a drink. I was climbing the walls. And it was at that point that I realized something was really wrong with me. I didn't know up until that point that maybe what my ex-husband had said 7 years prior, Mary Margaret, I think you might have a drinking problem. Maybe he was right because I was doing this. My body needed that drink. And that morning, all of a sudden, I got out of the bed. I went down the stairs into the kitchen. I put my hands up like this, and I said to my now ex-husband, "Take me somewhere before I change my mind." And all of a sudden, all three kids came running to the kitchen. My husband said, "What?" And I said, "Take me somewhere before I change my mind." That was not me talking. That was God doing for me what I could not do for myself. Now, I didn't realize all that at that time. You know, when we have insight, we can look back in hindsight. Um, I- but I had been looking my whole life for something to quench that thirst. I needed some power. I just didn't know what to fill that hole in my soul. So I want to make it clear that it's not just about not drinking. If that were true, I wouldn't need y'all. I've tried so many ways to find power. So many ways. I mean, I grew up in the church. I grew up going to youth group. I grew up going to church camp. And at church camp, I would be much moved, just like Bill was. I would be much moved. And then his presence would be blotted out by the worldly clamors, mostly within myself. And then when I got married in 1998, I converted to Judaism. Oh, that'll be the answer. And again, much moved. And then his presence would be blotted out by the worldly clamors, mostly within myself. I've been to therapy since I was 6 years old. None of it worked. Nothing. And I want to just remind you or tell you if you don't know, Dr. Bob spent years in the Oxford group before he met Bill and was surrounded by the solution. But he didn't know what he suffered from. And once he understood what he suffered from, he pursued God with new zest and new zeal because he knew his life depended on it. And I can totally relate to that new zest and that new zeal that Dr. Bob had for God. When I learned that alcoholism was an illness, I understood I was suffering from a progressive fatal disease. And it was such a relief off my shoulders. When I went to treatment the next day after I held my hands up and said, "Take me somewhere," my husband was in action, took me to treatment the next morning. And those people told me that I had an allergy to alcohol. I was like, well, wait a minute. I have an allergy to a lot of medication. They said, and you don't take the medication, right? I said, no, I blow up like the Pillsbury Doughboy. I don't take that medication. And they said, and you can't ever pick up another drink. Ah, that made sense to me. It made so much sense. So on step one, lack of power was my dilemma, right? I mean, it just, okay, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, but that our lives became unmanageable. I thought that meant all this stuff on the outside. And I said, but my life's not unmanageable. I get my kids to school, I do this, I do that. They were like, nope, nope, sorry. But I still didn't really get that part until I went through Big Book Awakening. And Big Book Awakening does such a beautiful job of turning the statements into questions, asking me my personal questions about that unmanageability in just a deeper sense. And it finally just hit me on the forehead that lack of power was my dilemma. And it's still my dilemma. It will always be my dilemma. And that is what has enabled me to surrender so much to the God of my own understanding today, especially like my relationship with my own children. And I'll get to that a little bit later. But step two, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. You know, on page 56 in our big book, Fitz Mayo has this thunderbolt moment. And I had a thunderbolt moment too. When Fitz Mayo has his thunderbolt moment, he says, "Who are you to say there is no God?" Right? Well, my thunderbolt moment happened when I was in treatment, and I think it was about the fourth day, and I was meeting with my therapist, just our first one-on-one. And she said to me, "Mary Margaret, when was the last time you had a conversation with God?" And I just stared at her like, huh? Like I couldn't even answer her. And these my eyes just welled up with tears. And I just couldn't even answer her. And then I hear this thought, it was a whisper for me. And it was, you've put God on the back burner. That was my thunderbolt moment. I had put God on the back burner for Miller Lite for all those years. And I felt this huge sense of guilt and burden and shame and all of those negative feelings. But it woke me up. I had to have that experience to be woken up. And you guys told me it can be the God of your own understanding. And that was like the biggest gift that anybody could have ever given me because I had been brought up in the church and I had a lot of prejudices. Some things had happened to me in the church and, that needed a good inventory, and we'll get to that. And so the fact that I could have a God of my own understanding, not conception, but understanding, was such a gift from this program. And step three, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. I was like, wait a minute, what is all this malarkey? Like every step, it was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna do it, but like my antennas were like, I don't know. And so this is what it was, made a decision. So, okay, I'm gonna make this decision, but so I made up this little experiment in treatment. All right, I've got a decision. And what I'm going to do is when I have to make a choice A is going to be like what I would normally do, what Mary Margaret wants to do. And choice B is going to be the opposite of what I would normally choose. And so choice B ended up being 9 out of 10 times what God's will would be. So choice A was Mary Margaret. Ooh, yay, let's do what Mary Margaret wants to do. And choice B always ended up to be the opposite of that, which was God's will. And so when I would have a choice, I would pick choice B, which ended up being God's will, and it always worked out for the better. Imagine that. That experiment that I did for myself, it just showed me so much of the fact that, Mary Margaret, the choices that you want and the choices that you've been making wound you up in Alcoholics Anonymous, wound you up in treatment for alcoholism. Your mind is not making good choices. And one of the decisions that I had to make, I made a lot of decisions while I was at treatment because I ended up staying 5 extra months in sober living. So I was there for 8 total months. One of the decisions was at the end when I was coming out of sober living, and okay, am I going to move out December 15th or January 15th? Well, of course, December 15th, I'm ready to go. So the new apartment where I was going to move into, because at that point I was homeless because I had filed for divorce. So I was homeless and I wanted to move to my new apartment December 15th. And the apartment said, well, we have it available December 15th or January 15th. Well, I wanted December 15th. So I chose January 15th because that would be the opposite of what I wanted. So I go back to the treatment place where I was living, and I told them I'm going to be moving January 15th. I said I could have gone December 15th. And they said, "Oh no, you couldn't. We wouldn't have allowed you to go December 15th. It's too close to the holidays. I said, oh, okay. So that decision again was one that I chose against what I would want, and it worked out. And so things like that just kept happening to me. And so I could see how me making this decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God, and what that looked like to me visually was like a bird's nest with me sitting in the middle of the bird's nest, and or like hands, and the hands were the hands of God with me sitting in the middle of it. Because really, step three, the focus for me was that word care, that I knew that God, of my own understanding, was going to take care of me. And that little experiment, doing those actions, really showed me that step three was something that was for real. And I could see it working in my life. I mean, it worked so much in my life in that divorce process. I can't even tell you. It was unbelievable. All right. So then step four, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. The spiritual experience is that now I know when I'm being selfish. This is what step four gave me. I have an ability to like check myself before this goes into a snowball because of step four. Like I asked myself these four questions: self-seeking, where am I being self-seeking? Like, what are the actions and behaviors I took to get what I wanted? And like, this is how what I do on a daily basis. This is how powerful step four was for me. I use it every single day in my life. Um, and like, I'll just use an example of my dad. Um, when I was doing step four and on the fourth column, um, once I was old enough, I didn't visit my dad. My parents were divorced. And I kept my own children, once I had them, away from him and my stepmother and my little baby brother. And so, like, how was I selfish? What did I want from the situation, good or bad? And I wanted my dad to come home when I was a little girl after he had left and live with our family. And this showed me by doing that fourth column um, that I did not care about his happiness at all. That showed me my selfishness. And when I was doing this actual inventory, it really helped me see my selfishness on this end, because it's exactly how my own children were feeling about me and how selfish my own children were being towards me. But I had done the exact same thing to my own father. And then the dishonest, what lie did I tell either the person or myself? The lie I told myself was that my dad left because I was born a girl. And I told myself that when I was 4 years old, little, itty bitty. And I believed my dad wanted me to be a boy because I already had an older sister. So that dishonesty followed me from when I was an itty bitty girl all the way till I was 48 when I did the original inventory. And it made me feel unworthy, not good enough, which affected all of my relationships, even like the relationship with the school bus driver or relationship with, the cashier at Target. I mean, it affected everything. And then the fear, what was I afraid of not getting, or am I afraid of losing? I feared what other people thought of me my entire life. as a result of my dad leaving. And so my fears drive the dishonesty, the delusions that result in my selfish attitude that are behind my actions. And this cycle happens over and over and over again as a result of fear running my life. And I didn't see all of that until I went through Big Book Awakening. I didn't see how the fears drove the dishonesty and the selfish attitude over and over and over and over again. And that was such a wake up call for me because it all starts with fear for me. And, when I admitted that to God, to ourselves, and another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs, I can see that fear was the exact nature of my wrong. And today, I don't have to live in fear all the time because I don't have the power. Remember, lack of power is my dilemma. I don't have the power. But I do have a God of my own understanding who is going to take care of me all the time, not just sometimes, all the time. And it might not be the way I want to be taken care of, but it's the way he deems that I'm taken care of. And I believe that faith is the results of results. And I have a whole result list that I can show you and share with you of the way God has taken care of me. I can't deny it. I've kept a list. If I deny it, I'm not being honest. And step 6 and 7, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character and humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. You guys, I live in step 6 and 7 every single day. Whenever I am disturbed, whenever I'm bothered, whenever I'm irritated, that's step 6 and 7 inside of me. I'm bothered because something inside of Mary Margaret. It has nothing to do with you. It's something unresolved inside of me. And so I have to go to God and humbly ask Him to remove my shortcoming, whatever is being bothered, whatever is inside of me that's not healed. And step 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. That list was so long. It was so long for me. And it scared me. But all my sponsor said, all this is making a list. It doesn't say you're going to make amends to them all. It just says you have to be willing to make amends to them all. Oh, I could breathe again. I could breathe again. And when I did step 8, my sponsor said, I want you, don't make a list of like, we're not looking at the harm you did. I want you to feel how you harmed them. Okay. If you took money from them, that's not the harm. The harm is maybe they couldn't afford groceries the next week. You left them without money. You caused them stress. You caused them to be without. I said, oh, because the first time I did it, I did not do step 8 correctly. So I was very grateful for a new sponsor to have corrected that for me. And step nine, may direct amends such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Just last week, um, I had been struggling with my children because they don't really want so much to do with me. And while I understand, I don't. And my heart has been broken. My heart is broken. And I know that I can't play God, but I also know I have a voice. I have a voice. And God keeps telling me, use your voice, Mary Margaret, use your voice. Invite them over and use your voice. And so I've done my direct amends with my children, the two that came over. And I did the direct amends 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And so now it's all about living amends. But the children don't want to be that active with me and Derek. And so I invited them over and voiced my heart is broken. And the fact that I know I can't control y'all but I need y'all to know that I love you. I am here for you. My door is always open. And my daughter looked at me and she said, "You'll never understand how hard it was for me to be playing basketball and look up in the stands and not see my mom up there watching me play basketball." It was so incredibly sad. And what this tells me is that she is not ready. She's not ready. And I have to make the road easy for her. It is a long road of reconstruction. And in the meantime, I keep showing up here and carrying the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. I keep my heart open and willing and loving for my children, just like God has always been open and willing and loving to me. And I keep praying and meditating. Step 10, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. And I just want, a little bit after that paragraph, it says, and we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For this time, sanity will have returned. The words we have ceased fighting are really what stood out to me in the beginning when I read this. Those words stood out the most. And it's a good thing, mostly for my ex-husband, because we were going through the divorce. And I realized I didn't have to fight him. God was going to fight my battles for me the way he saw appropriate. And I might not have liked it. And there were things that happened during that divorce that I didn't like. But I kept my hands off of it because I knew and I trusted that God was going to see fit, that everything was going to work out the way it was supposed to. And so step 10 goes on, continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. When these crop up, not if, but when, we ask God to remove them at once, to remove them. And so, like, this is like 6 and 7, what I was talking about earlier. We discuss them with someone immediately and make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. Like, get this off of your plate. Deal with it now. This is what I do. I deal with it now. I don't want to go to bed with this on me. I don't have to live like that anymore. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts. Like I physically turn my head. Like I turn my head. Like I do that to someone we can help. Like I don't have to go across the street and help the little old lady. No, it's a turn my thoughts. And then love and tolerance is of others is our code. Love is a decision here. I choose to want God's best for others. And tolerance is an action, not a desire. I choose to stop judging and blaming. When I catch myself judging and blaming, that means I've dropped God's hand. And I always want to be holding it tight. Step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God. Step 11 is one of my favorite. I mean, I do so much prayer and meditation in the morning. You know, I heard somebody say a while ago, flee to the mountain, and the mountain is God or your higher consciousness. You know, application is a must. It's a necessity here. And I spend more of my day with God than without him. Um, and it hasn't always been like that though. You know, in the beginning, I started with the AA daily reflection and some Hazelton and some gratitude apps. And I began meditating for 2 or 3 minutes and built up from there. And then I read Sermon on the Mount with a group of ladies, and that book really changed me. The Sermon on the Mount. I mean, it really, and I used to go to a Sermon on the Mount meeting. Like it was just fabulous. Um, but the thing about prayer, about step 11, is that the point of it is to improve our conscious contact with God. Prayer and meditation is just the suggested avenue, right? It, it is very broad and roomy, step 11 is. And the point is to improve your conscious contact. And so, another thing in the very beginning of my journey, anytime I had like a negative thought or I was bothered, I would say, hello, God. Some of you on this meeting know this. And one day I said, hello, God, 500 times. But it didn't matter because it kept me in conscious contact with God of my own understanding. And the repetition, repetition, repetition helped me learn to always be in conscious contact. And so it was beautiful. And step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. You guys, sponsorship has been the most rewarding yet humbling experience for me. I wanted nothing to do with it at first. And thank God that wasn't an option for me. My sponsor said, you're ready to sponsor. Go find a prospect. And that was the end of that conversation. And I will truly say that the ladies I walk shoulder to shoulder with have helped me far more than I have helped them. And I think that that is really how it was meant to be. Um, I just really cannot say any more goodness about the 12th step. And if you are here and you're in this program and you're not sponsoring, you're not working all 12 steps. I hate to bust your bubble, but you're not. And you're really missing out. You're missing out on beautiful opportunities. And you know, at the beginning, I told you the joke about the fairy tales. And I wanted to bring up fairy tales because the big book talks about great events will come to pass and life will take on new meaning. And one of the great events that has come to pass for me is my marriage. And we had a fairy tale romance that was really created by the God of our own both understanding. And he courted me. Even some of it was just by FaceTime. We met in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous on Zoom. He asked me to marry him with a beautiful engagement ring, and we got married on the beach here, where we are right now, South Carolina. And I truly felt like a princess that day. And all of this with God and all of you in the middle of us. And the reason I'm sharing this is because there's so much hope in these rooms. When you surround yourself with people who are working the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, not just hanging out in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I say program, I mean the 12 steps in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I hope that I have given you all something to relate to tonight. I am really, really happy that 63 people showed up. Thank you so much for being here. And that's really all I have to share tonight. But every one of you are so very loved. So thank you.